Welcome to the Local Fly Podcast. I'm Mark Nutting, a fly fishing guide, outdoor enthusiast, environmentalist, and father. Come join me as we discuss a wide range of topics from fishing, conservation, travel, and cuisine.
One of the guys with us had a high-powered rifle. Well, he shot it full of holes.
In this episode, I sit down with Captain Fuzzy Davis, a charter boat captain in the Low Country for over 40 years, who has become a legend around here in our inshore waters. So Fuzzy Davis, the man, the myth, the legend. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh man, great to be here with you, Mark.
Fuzzy, let's get into it. I got a ton of stuff that I definitely would love to know. And what was it like growing up?
Well, I tell you what, I grew up kind of all over the place. My dad was with Kroger Foods, so we traveled everywhere. My happiest moment was when we lived in Wisconsin, which I used to ice fish. Man, I can't believe that. I hate cold weather now. Yeah. But when he came home one day and he said, "Hey, we're going to move to Nashville, Tennessee." Well, all the bass magazines I had showed nothing but these huge bass coming out of the TVA lake. So I was doing backflips for the bass, and kind of grew up in high school fishing those bass lakes, and then my folks moved down to Hilton Head, South Carolina, and I was able to cut my teeth down there on some saltwater fishing, and luckily enough started fishing inshore with one of my mentors, Captain George Cook, the guy that named me Fuzzy. Oh, wow. And we started to backwater fish and inshore fish, and that's really where I found my love for it.
So how did you make it to the Low Country?
Well, through that connection, when my folks moved down to South Carolina, to Hilton Head, and I started working there. Actually, my first job was to sweep the steps in the Harbortown Lighthouse. Really? Yeah, that was my first job. Oh my goodness! I have figured out that you start at the top, and work your way down. You know, it took me a couple of days to figure that out, but it was a great job. Great group of people then. You know, back in those days, the early '70s, everybody knew everybody. It was a small community. Just a great place, and the estuaries, although I hadn't really been able to fish all of them, were just unbelievable. Really? I mean, the middle of Calabogie Sound on a weekday, there was nobody. It was an amazing place. It really was. Wow, a little magical.
How would you compare the fishery back then? I mean,
that's an interesting question. Of course, I wasn't as good at catching fish back then as I am now. Sure. But I compare catches to what I saw, coming into the docks when I first started guiding. I started guiding, my first year was actually 40 years ago this year, as an official guide with my own boat. In 1979 is when I started. But back in those days, you didn't see the number of big redfish that you do now. I think that conservation efforts, and because of limits, size limits, bag limits, stocking by the Waddell Mariculture Center, it's really enhanced our fishery. And I mean, it's a lot better than it was back in '79. I can tell you that.
And what about the trout fishery? Was that the same deal?
The trout fishery was kind of, I'd say, was the same. Okay. It was kind of the same. And, the way I view trout too, they're kind of at the whim of the cold temperatures in the wintertime. So you might lose part of a population, and then they kind of bounce back, takes them a couple years to bounce back. So that's kind of what we saw back then. There were a couple years where we lost a lot of fish, like we did 2 years ago in the freeze of 2018. Yeah. But, the trout fishing was still pretty good. Of course, cobia fishing was unbelievable then.
It's really died off.
Yeah, it's really inshore. It's really really slow right now. So hopefully it'll come back. And Waddell Mariculture Center is doing a lot to enhance that too. Really. So we're grateful for them.
What would you say about the tarpon fishery? Would you say compared to?
Well, I tell you what, I started fishing for tarpon really just because some of the local fishermen at Harbortown were coming in, and they'd say they were trolling for Spanish mackerel out there on the outer bars off of South Beach, and they'd hook tarpon. So I said, well, hey, man, they got to be out there. So I really devoted all my time to going out there and finding and trying to discover where they were. The first couple of years we fished for them, I think we only caught maybe 3 or 4 fish a year. And then it evolved into catching 30 and 40 and 50 fish a year. So the whole fisheries evolved. We started off with 1 or 2 spots. Now we have multiple spots in Calabogie Sound and Port Royal Sound, near shore waters. It's been a phenomenal shot in the arm to inshore fishing in this area.
There's a bunch of fuzzy stories.
Oh, jeez.
Can you tell me some of them?
Oh, my goodness. I tell you, one thing about being a fishing guide, you get pretty intimate with people. You learn a lot about their families and stuff. It's been a fun journey. In the same way with all the skippers, all the charter boat captains, and I just look back, many years ago. One of the stories was this was great. The state wasn't building any artificial reefs back in the late 70s and early 80s. So a group of charter boat guys and myself decided we'd take that on ourselves.
Nice.
Well, this was probably deemed as highly illegal, to go out and dump anything in the ocean. But one of the classics was, and I can't tell you who was in on this thing. They might get in trouble. But
Sure.
We took an old wooden boat that somebody had given us. We filled it full of engine blocks. We took it about 3 miles offshore. We started filling it with water. We pulled the plugs out of the boat, started filling it with water. Well, the thing wouldn't sink. It wouldn't sink. So one of the guys with us had a high-powered rifle. Well, he shot it full of holes. And lo and behold, the boat sank a little bit. Then it turned upside down. It dumped all those engine blocks out. And then it came zooming back to the surface. So now we got a 25-foot wooden boat with bullet holes in it floating around out there. Well, we said, well, we're not going to take it back. It'll probably drift out to sea and we'll be okay. Well, the next day, I was coming by South Beach on my way out for a charter, fishing the South Beach Rip there.
Yeah.
I looked up to my left and I saw the boat. It was on the beach and there was about 5 sea pines maintenance guys standing around it, scratching their heads like, what are we going to do with this thing?
And things full of bullet holes.
Full of bullet holes. So they called the sheriff's department. Well, we forgot to take off the registration from the boat.
Oh, man.
So the state, the sheriff's department traced it back to a friend of ours that had given us the boat to make the reef out of. They showed up at his house, and this is back in the day when there was a lot of illicit drug smuggling going on in the Low Country, and they figured this was probably a drug related incident. So they woke our friend up one morning and said, "We found your boat full of bullet holes on the beach." So he had to talk his way out of that thing, and Sea Pines took care of the wood that was on the beach, but that was a saga. Another boat we had a little 18-foot skiff, and we wanted to sink it. Now it was fiberglass, so we called the concrete. We said the only way we're going to be able to get this boat to sink, because the engine blocks didn't work too well, We're going to have to pour some concrete in the bottom of this boat. So we called up the concrete company, and we had the boat sitting there in the water at Palmetto Bay. The concrete guy drove up, and he said, "Hey, did somebody order some concrete?" And he said, "Yeah, we did." I said, "Where do you want it?" And he said, "See that boat right there? Just back right up to that boat and pour." I think he poured 2 yards of concrete in the bottom of that thing. He said, "If I pour that concrete in that boat's going to sink." We said, "Well, that's the idea. Go ahead and pour it in there." So we did, and that one was a little bit more successful. But I have to say that we really, with all of our efforts, we really never did catch too much off of those reefs. So better to let the state handle what they do the best in creating a reef.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's one that they said like I guess this only Fuzzy could do, but like apparently did your motor go break down and then you just did like old school style and just kind of pulled? Is there any?
Oh, I've had a couple instances back in the day where the engine has failed. I've done everything that you can do. Well, let me reverse that a little bit. Every day I fish, I find out that I haven't experienced everything yet. So, but I did run out of gas one time on the way out from the dock and had to be towed back in. Um, I did fall out of the boat one time, and with the engine running, and
Oh
my
no.
charter had to come back and get me. And when they came back, and I'll never forget it, I had my dog Keeper, who had been fishing with me for 10 or 11 years. He was standing on the boat, like going, "What are you doing in the water?" You know, he's looking out off the bow of the boat. Anyhow, the charter came back to get me. I climbed in the boat and I expected like a little bit of sympathy out of the charter, you know, because my knees were killing me. They hit the swim platform on the way out of the boat. And the guy looked at his son, looked at me, and he goes, "And we made reservations for this." I said, "Oh man, that hurt. That hurt.
Oh
That
man.
hurt about as bad as my knees did." And I don't think we caught anything that day either. That really hurt. But
Sure.
so you never know. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, when you're out there like you do, you see new stuff every day, experience new things every day. Got caught in the fog one day and in Port Royal Sound and went around in circles for about 2 hours.
It's
And
amazing how lost you can get so quickly. I mean,
oh,
when it peels over, I mean, you can
oh
literally
yeah.
end up from one side to another side, and yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I mean, this is
Especially if
kind
your
of
GPS ain't working.
before GPS, and I
Right.
had a Loran, but I didn't really set it before I went out. It didn't have a chart built into it,
Yeah.
so that was another time that the people. I don't think I ever saw those folks again coming back.
I got a few of them too.
But yeah,
Yeah, I don't even use a GPS in the boat. So it still happens every once in a while when that
yeah.
fog kicks up. It's
The fog is the worst.
yeah, that's tough.
I love it because you know if it's foggy, it's
It's
going to be
calm.
slick calm,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can hear stuff just forever. It seems like
Yeah.
when it's foggy like that.
Where do you see the fishing industry going in the future?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question, and I think in the last few years, I think we've got you know, a real interesting dilemma between the success of development and building on the coast
Sure.
and the pressure that we're putting on the fishery and the number of boats that we have in the water right now. I know you see it too. I
Yeah.
mean, you
It's
go out and it's
just in the last 5-10 years
yeah,
alone.
in the last 5 or 10 years, like you say, you go out and uh, there's there are of course a lot of guides, but there are a lot of a lot of you know private boats and boat clubs and water sports. It's all impacting you know, and I'm not saying like the early people on Hilton Head said, close the bridge, man. We don't need anybody else. You know, hey, I was here, got to enjoy it. You know, come on. You know,
Sure.
but it does provide you know an extra. Uh, you know, you really have to examine kind of what you're doing, where you're going, where the most boat traffic is going to be, if it's a weekend or not. I remember, you know, fishing a weekend or Saturday really didn't make any difference, and now it does. So I think boat traffic is a huge one. I think we're gonna really have to look at size limits and release limits again because that's going to impact these fish. We've got more hooks in the water, catching more fish. We're going to have to look at that, but these are dilemmas that everybody faces. I mean, Charleston faced them few years ago.
Yeah, we're kind of lucky, really, right?
Yeah, we've been lucky,
I
and
mean, Charleston's
and
got
we still have some areas that don't see the pressure, that are near to us, that don't have the amount of pressure. So we're lucky in that respect.
right.
But then again, we're just going to have to. It helps to educate too. It helps to educate the people that are fishing and boating in the area about what's etiquette and what's not.
Sure. And that's a huge topic. I mean, etiquette
Yeah,
and then how to, you know.
yeah,
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. What advice would you give to all these younger anglers and new guides that are coming in?
Uh, it's interesting too, because a lot of those new guides are my friends. Because actually, my son
Yeah, yeah,
is a guide.
right.
He just graduated from Auburn. He's fishing his own boat right now. There's a lot of young guys that are out there doing the same thing.
He's doing a great job too.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks. It's
yeah.
been a lot of fun fishing with him and fishing together. But I think I look at it too as a lot of discovery. I'm still all ears. I listen. Even though I fished the area for a long time, it's like anything. You never really learn it. Everything. And I'm listening to a lot of these new guides, and they're saying, "Well, I fished here, I fished there," and I'm thinking to myself, "I never fished there before." You
Sure.
know, and
Just
they're catching fish,
sure.
and they're using different techniques. And I think that's the beauty about what we do, is you can't ever learn it all. There's new creeks to go
It's-
up to.
yeah.
There's no new rivers, new areas to discover. But I'd say
I think the moment you think you have it all figured out
oh,
is the moment you really don't. You
totally.
don't know. You know.
Yeah, and that, to me, that's the most true when tarpon fishing.
Oh yeah.
The second you say, "Man, I got them. I'm going out there this week. It ought to be great." And where'd the fish go?
They're so
You know?
humbling around here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
know.
Good. Good one day, you
Yeah,
know, and then bad the next.
but I think to the new guides, I'd say, just be persistent and be in the discovery mode. And a lot of these guys like yourself are going skinnier and skinnier
Hmm.
in smaller boats so they can get in areas that a lot of other people can't, and that's good. And I think they're the ones that have to look at policing the limits and keep it within what you think a particular area will take. Of course, abide by the state limits, but you
Sure.
know don't pound it every day and take every fish out of the area.
Yeah, it's hard. You
Yeah,
see a lot of guys will just go to the same spots because they'll catch fish there,
yeah,
and they just keep fishing it until they
yeah.
wear them out pretty good.
Yeah, I know. We had a little seminar the other day. Al Stokes, he was responsible for. He was with the Waddell Mariculture Center, just recently retired, and Al was talking about the redfish program and what he's done, and basically the reds don't leave from the time they're hatched, they don't leave that particular area for maybe 3 to 4 years. Within they stay within about a mile to a half mile to a mile of
Yeah.
where they were born,
Hmm.
or where they first started off as fingerling. So like you say, if you go back, if you keep going back, and everybody's taking 2 or 3 fish a day, it may not seem like a lot, but over the course of a couple years, will that school replenish itself with other fish? We don't know, but as it's kind of been proven from what my experience and your experience, that the places don't really regain the number of fish that they have in them on earlier stages.
Do you notice that like they don't eat as well? Like the more pressure they have, the less apt they
Yeah,
are to.
definitely. Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. We want, as a guide, you want goofy fish. You want fish that haven't
right.
seen anybody. They eat everything. You cast behind them. They turn around and eat the bait. You know,
Dumb
the
fish.
worst thing you can
Yeah.
have is smart fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more that you go into an area and you're pressuring them, and it doesn't mean it doesn't really pressure them with the boat. I mean, with the casting as much. It's just the presence of the boat.
Right.
When they hear the boat or they see see the people or whatever, it gives them the yips, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it.
Hmm.
You know, you can tell when you found a school of fish that hasn't been fished in a while. They're just happy floating,
Love it.
and it's what we fish for right there,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, for sure. I
It's
love it. I
great.
definitely love that. What are some tips for catching more trout?
I tell you what, um, well, for catching more trout, I learned this from a Savannah angler years ago. And the first time or the first couple of years I was fishing trout, I was using a little single hook. And as you know, trout's known as a weak fish. So a lot of times when you hook the fish, it tears a hole and it rips a hole in his mouth. And when I was fishing with this gentleman, he goes, you know what, I appreciate that you're using a single hook, but I trout fish strictly with a small treble.
Hmm.
And so I started using a number 10 bronze treble hook, and I'll squeeze down the barbs a lot of times so the hook pops out. But the 10 is little tiny hook, and you can put the shrimp when you hook the shrimp. That shrimp will stay alive basically for hours with that hook. It won't kill them like a single hook will, because most of the single hooks are big, you know, wider metal, and they'll make a bigger hole in the shrimp, and the shrimp will end up dying. But when I started using the trebles, I probably quadrupled my trout catch. And with a small enough treble, the fish are easy to release. So you can basically your mortality ratio is very small, even with using a treble hook. And it's kid friendly. The kids catch a lot of them.
Yeah,
You know, I
sure.
think it's been fun too. We use a lot of artificials, a lot of jigs. Um, the Z-Man jigs have been really good on trout. Uh, just incredible. The plastics, the advances in the plastics are just unbelievable from the time that I started fishing. And the scented baits, just the advance into making a like a shrimp lure look exactly like a shrimp. I mean, that's like it's incredible
It
what's
is.
made now.
Yeah.
And I tell you, you know, the top water thing has gotten to be a big deal. Never was before. You know, there's a handful of guides that have really gotten into that fishing at low light. I know you do the same thing,
Mm.
working top water bass baits for the trout. They love them,
Love, yeah.
and it's so much fun fishing that way.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, uh, for as far as catching more trout, that small, tiny little treble with a live shrimp is just it's scary good, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and about a 25-pound fluorocarbon leader. It's just it's amazing. But I do like the fact that even using that treble hook, we can still release a lot of fish unharmed, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah, you wouldn't think so, but actually, when you really do think
yeah.
about it, definitely. I mean,
And you bend the barbs
barbs
down,
down. You
and all the top water baits almost all have two treble hooks on them. You know, so you know, it just shows if the fish is hooked in the mouth, and you can get them in and get them back and revive them pretty quick.
what are your other passions?
Oh man, I tell you, I've got too many hobbies, Mark, right now. But I love. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and was always a rock and roll drummer. So I'm into the music scene, but I quit playing drums when I moved down here. They're just too loud. They're too cumbersome. I started playing hand percussion. I play conga drums, and I get to play with the John Brackett Quartet once a week playing percussion with them. And John's another fishing guide. So it's fun. We get
That's
in there
awesome.
and play music, and then we're talking about where we fished that day, you know?
Right.
So it's kind of it's a lot of fun that way. Then I play with a Latin band, a
Very
group
cool.
of guys, and one super gal singer from Mexico, and we're pretty much traditional Latin music.
Really?
So I love doing that. I
Yeah.
love playing percussion. I love playing Latin music and jazz. Um, One of my other hobbies. It's become a lot of work. I don't know if somebody said, "Would you do this again if you knew how much work it was?" And I said, I probably wouldn't do it again, but I've learned a lot. I have a little blueberry farm up in Scotia, South Carolina, which is a little bit north of Hardyville.
Huh.
And got into that, saw the blueberry plants down in South Georgia when I was working down there as a guide. And I just kind of, I said, blueberries, you can't grow blueberries in the South. Did some research, found out they grow real good here. So
Really?
I've been doing that. But I tell you what, I have a lot of respect for farmers after doing
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
Fishing's a whole lot easier, I tell you.
Are blueberries pretty profitable around here?
Well, they are when you do it on a big scale,
Okay. Yeah.
and I have kind of like a hobby farm.
Okay.
It's a U pick.
That's perfect.
So we get a lot of folks up there to pick them in the
Mhm.
late spring, and so and we do some farmers markets. Did the farmers market in Bluffton and in Sea Pines on Hilton Head.
Yes.
So it's interesting. I love meeting the people. It's kind of like the guide business because
Sure.
people are coming in there to pick blueberries that you would never meet, and it's
Right.
everybody from, all walks, and it's been fun. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot more patience with farming than I had with fishing. So
Really? Yeah.
yeah, just
I mean,
just
I
amazing.
grew up with the blueberries as well, but I was always bad. We used to take a coffee can and put like a string around it,
Uh-huh.
and I would just go through. And the problem was that I would always pick a bunch and I would eat them, and then only one would go in the little coffee
that's
can.
right,
So I
yeah.
got done. I would always get yelled at for not bringing
Yeah.
enough blueberries back.
Well, we have a similar thing. We have a bucket with a string on it, and we tell people that we don't charge them for the berries they eat. So they eat probably for every 2 buckets they pick, they probably eat a bucket, but that's okay with us. So
Can we find your blueberries in the supermarket?
yeah,
or stuff
we
too?
have we'll probably be in. Luckily, we had a Piggly Wiggly, David Martin's Piggly Wiggly down at Coligny Plaza on the south end has been nice enough to keep our berries in there during the season. The season is in May, so that's when they'll be there, and then we'll probably be over at the Bluffton Market.
Yeah.
But we also have a little Facebook page. It's Carrie's Berries, Kerrys at Fuzzy's Farm.
Nice.
So yeah, so my daughter is Carrie, so we named him Carrie's Berries.
Very nice.
So
How's she doing? Good.
she's doing great.
Yeah.
She's be graduating from Auburn in May, so we're excited about that.
That's great. Are you still doing the radio show?
Still doing the fishing forecast, man. I tell you, Monty Jet and I started doing a fishing report on a 107.9. It was probably about 35 years ago when we started doing that report.
Wow.
And we still do it every Monday through Friday, every morning, still on 107.9. It's called Rewind 107.9 now. So if you if you just Google Rewind 107.9, you can hit the listen live button and hear us. And we come on at 20 to 8 on Monday through Friday. We always do a trivia question. We have a lot of fun, and everything we say is true. I'll get a couple Pinocchios on that one. We have fun, and that's the name of the game. And I've had a lot of fun. Been very blessed being down here in the Low Country.
Yeah.
I know you have too, man. It's just been a great experience.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful and
Yeah.
still pretty untouched, even though
It is.
it
really
in
is.
comparison.
Oh yeah.
Fuzzy, it's great having you on, man.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Man.
I tell you,
I could keep you here all night, I'm sure. Man.
Well, we share the same passion, and I tell
Yeah.
you, and that's what brought us together.
Yeah.
Fishing shallow water, backwater. We see things we wish we could show everybody. The bird life, the all the sea mammals that we see, and just being with the general public and being able to share with them what we see has been a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. So Fuzzy, how do we find you?
Well, I tell you what, I've got my website is fuzzydavis.com. Also, Silva Dollar Charters. That's SILVADOLLA Charters.
Yeah,
And now people ask me, well, why'd you name what's up with Silva Dollar?
Yeah, what's a silver dollar?
What is a silver dollar?
Yeah.
Well, a silver dollar is actually a tarpon scale. It's the nickname for a tarpon scale because it's big and silver. And in the South, you don't say silver dollar, you say silver dollar. So that's why Silver Dollar Charters. So there you go. And they can also use my email address. It's just fuzzydavis@gmail.com.
All right.
Yeah,
I love it. Fuzzy, thanks for coming out, man.
Hey, Mark, been a pleasure. Great to be with you, and tight lines to you, buddy.
You too, man.
Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.